Guys, Jay's back, and what I got for you today is another video. I'm going to try to upload a little bit more often, but today what I'm talking about is Mulm. The good, the bad, and the aquarium. Now, a lot of people find Mulm, dirty. They say it's a dirty tank, it's going to cause all kinds of fluctuations, this, that, and the other. Okay, well, what I want to tell you today is this tank right here, and most of my tanks actually, I never clean up the Mulm. And there's a bunch of different reasons why. If you have a bare bottom tank, I mean, you might want to do it. Basically what Mulm is the decomposing organic matter that is in your aquarium. May it be fish waste, like say driftwood rotting, plant decay, stuff like that. Now, the reason why I don't remove it is, especially since most of my tanks are planted, and I'll get the bare bottom tanks here shortly, but in planted tanks, that has a lot of nutrients in it for your plants. Now, like say this tank right here, it's been up and running for, well, let's see, I think I started my YouTube channel shortly after I got this tank up and running. But anyway, I've never done a gravel vac in here. I've never sucked out the Mulm, nothing like that. Matter of fact, ever since I started up my substrate experiment, which if you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's called New Substrate Substrate Experiment Complete Success. I recommend checking that. But the reason why I don't do it is, one, it turns into nutrients for the plants. And the way I have my substrate set up, and with the help of the Malaysian trumpet snails, dig stuff up that Mulm will sink down and turn into fertilizer for my plants. Now, with all these nutrients that's being added to your water, I mean, that could raise your TDS, I mean, there's a lot of different things it could do. However, especially in a planted tank, I find it more good than bad. Matter of fact, all around, I just find Mulm good. But lost my train of thought. But also, Mulm helps with breeding of a lot of different fish species. Before I had this tank up and running before, I had a bunch of bare bottom tanks that had a bunch of pothos growing out of it. So any excess nutrients is sucked up by the pothos, stuff like that. Now, a lot of different fish species rely on that Mulm to survive. Like when I was breeding a couple different plecos, or even ones that everybody says that when they hatch you have to give them baby brine shrimp, like German blue rams. If that tank has been established long enough, that Mulm actually grows like all kinds of different microorganisms that those fish require to survive. I have bred, matter of fact, I had I think at the time it was only 20 long. And I had a couple pairs of German blue rams in there. Now, this is years and years ago, before we even had any of the knowledge that we do now. But when I was breeding the German blue rams, never once did I actually feed them baby brine shrimp. The way, for how old that tank was, and the way I did my water changes and stuff like that back then, there was a lot of microorganisms that survived that these baby German blue rams would feed on. And the reason why I got such success out of that is because I would take the bottoms to terracotta pots, sit them like level with the substrate. I would dig it down in a little bit so they had the flat surface. But once those wigglers started becoming free swimmers, they didn't have to go far to get to that mulmy goodness, like all the microorganisms that are in there. So there's that. As long as you maintain your water quality, mulm is extremely beneficial. I mean, even the bare bottom tanks, out of all honesty, if you're doing bare bottom breeding projects, have some floating plants in there, stuff like that, to suck up the extra nutrients. Now, one thing you got to understand though, and I'm going to be doing a separate video about this, that a lot of those microorganisms, any form of fish dechlorinator can kill them. Because a lot of them, like I know Daphnia doesn't like sodium thiosulfate. It kills them off. Don't know why, it just does. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a different video about that. One of the healthiest things you can do for your aquarium is actually not add dechlorinator. What you want to do is prepare your water ahead of time, let it gas off, stuff like that, and then add it to your tank. And I just recently started doing it this way again. And now I'm seeing Daphnia in just about every tank that I have, which is awesome. A lot of people say that mulm is an eyesore. It leads to a dirty tank, this, that, and the other. Out of all honesty, I have seen the healthiest systems ever with a lot of mulm in it. And after a while, that mulm will break down and become basically inert. Okay, if the plants don't consume it first. So it's just basically dirt. That's basically all that mulm is dirt. Which, if you run a dirted tank, it's basically the same thing. Alright. All the dirt basically is broken down organic compounds. That's why plants need it to survive. They soak up their nutrients from the dirt. Especially if you have a lot of root feeding plants in here, like any type of crypt. Like my red tiger lotus. If you can see that, yep, you can see that in the frame. Like my dwarf sag. My Blixa japonica. They're root feeders. So that mulm getting down into the substrate is extremely beneficial for them. I mean, even Anubiases, okay? If they're close to the substrate, they're going to grow roots into the substrate to soak up more nutrients than they would from the water column. Stem plants, the same way. The source of feeding comes from their roots first, then the water column. That's why whenever you have floating plants, you see them trying to spread roots down. They're trying to get more of those nutrients. But out of all honesty, overall, I believe mulm is extremely beneficial to any aquarium really. Especially if you're doing breeding. If you don't have enough time to, like, say, like, you work like 6 days a week. And the way your hours are, you already have your light set to a timer. Let's say your hours changed. Okay, it's getting harder and harder to feed your fish. Well, if you have all those nice microorganisms for the fish to feed on, that's less feeding that you technically have to do. Basically, you're creating an established ecosystem. Take saltwater, for instance. They have refugiums. Sorry, brain's shot today. But basically, does the I'm going to give up on that. But what exactly does that do? It enables growth of all these different copepods and stuff like that for your aquarium. So, like, say you have the mandarin dragonfish. They only feed on basically microorganisms, like copepods, stuff like that. So that fish right there requires you to have a balanced ecosystem. Well, just like a freshwater tank, if you have a sustained ecosystem, you don't really have to do much with it. I mean, every now and then you have to go and trim the plants, or just like with, salt water, you have to frag your corals. But also with a reef tank, those copepods are essential to a reef tank. Well, I have also found, like, I have bred coolie loaches before. Only in this tank so far. So, but I have taken notice, like my friend I got a lot of these coolie loaches off of. When we were tearing down her tank, there was all this mulm and like all these microorganisms running around the substrate. She started off with like 3 or 4 coolie loaches. And by the time we tore down her tank, she had like 50 of them. Alright. I've seen the breeding activity in this tank already. Unfortunately, it's just the black coolie loaches instead of the ones I want to breed, but still. And I chalk that up to the Mulm, because it's containing all those microorganisms that that fish needs to breed and survive. Or even like corridors. You'll see them constantly going across the bottom. They'll sift through all the mulm, throw it everywhere. Okay, yes, some of that mulm's going to get sucked up by your filters, or your sumps, or whatever you have. But they're looking for leftover food in there, those microorganisms. And the more I have found with quarries, okay, that the more microorganisms that you're able to grow in your tank, the more steadily that they're going to breed. For quarries, live feeding is basically a trigger for breeding activity. So if you already have an established aquarium, there you go. That's why I've had a lot of different breeding in here. Matter of fact, I'm not sure if they're viable, but I just pulled some quarry eggs here the other day. They're the Julie corridors. So I'm waiting to see what happens with those. I hit them with, like I said, Braden's not working today. Whatever blue, to prevent the fungus from growing on the eggs. So right now I'm seeing if they're viable, if they're going to hatch. Only a few of them's like turned like a whitish color. The rest of them seem to be doing all right. So I'd say about half of them turned white. So, I mean, just remember, if you have mulm in your tank, especially if you have a planted tank, don't remove it. It's just going to become food for your plants, stuff like that. Even if you have a bare bottom tank and you're doing a breeding project, just put some pothos in there, some floating plants to soak up the extra nutrients, like the nitrates. So that way, when your fry are born, they have something to feed on. Now, like I said, I'm going to be doing a separate video about it. But when you're doing water changes, a lot of these microorganisms get killed off by dechlorinators. So stick around for that video. Hopefully this was somewhat informative. And yeah, catch you in the next one. Later.